I laid this out trying to think through how to get through this lesson 6. Of course, lesson 6 is divided up quite a bit here. So last week we covered the short trip. And of course, you see the answer. The short trip was how many days? 11 days was a short trip. But then they had to wind up taking the long trip, which took 40 years to do that one, to get that one done. So to think about that, the trip, from Mount Sinai to, going up there was only an 11-day trip. But of course, things changed because of people. And so with that, we're going to look at today the long trip. You think, well, that's 40 years. We'll cover 40 years. You'll be surprised how fast we can cover 40 years through this lesson here this morning. And I broke it down for the lesson, as you see here, Numbers 22 through 36 will be in the next lesson next week. So have an idea of this is how it's laid out for the next. Now, this is let me show you the next one. Here where it says Israel inherits Canaan. Now, it talks about Joshua, the book of Joshua. Lord willing, I probably think I can get through that in one lesson. We'll just have to see how that works out. The last one there may not make it all the way through because that is the book of Judges and the book of Ruth, as you see. So that lesson 6F might go to, what do we got, F, G, H? I don't know how far it's going to go. But we'll see how it goes. For those who are new in here, you say, what in the world is he doing? If you have one of the books, you'll see in the books, this is lesson 6. But I break it up and to go into more detail. So that's why it's like this. So to help us to learn a little bit more sometimes. The transitional years. The transitional years. The next 37 years or more were transitional years in the history of the nation of Israel. When the commencement and the closing days of the wilderness experience were included, the total time was 40 years. You're going to see in the book of Numbers, when chapter 16, we're going to pick up at what's taking place. If you have one of those handouts, you'll see that it says Israel in the wilderness. Because Israel had gone to Mount Sinai, and what happened they stayed at Mount Sinai how long? Anybody have any ideas? If you have one of the handouts, it'll tell you there. But anybody, apart from that? They stayed there 11 months. Almost a year, they stayed right there at Mount Sinai. What were they doing at Mount Sinai? Anybody have any ideas what they did at Mount Sinai? Sit around and had a party? I mean, what were they doing? Okay, he just going up and down the mountain. Let me go down to the mountain 7 times. Okay, what was he doing? Getting the law. And in getting the law also, what else did he get? Am I asking the wrong questions? That's right. He got, the Lord showed him what the tabernacle should be like and gave him the instructions on the tabernacle. And they built the tabernacle as also in this time period. So in building this tabernacle, so what's key about this? A couple of key things that you should know about Mount Sinai. Okay, he went up the mountain 7 times for different reasons. And I gave you a handout on that, about those reasons. Part of that was to give what? The law. Another thing, that was very key. I'm not saying minimize any part, but to give them the law, but also to give them the tabernacle and something else. What is it? The priesthood. Because here Moses is moving with the Lord leading him. He's moving how many people? How many people are moving along in this group? Probably close to 3. That's probably on the high end. We don't know. We just, you have to figure out a number. But between 2 and 3 million people, he's brought out of Egypt by the Lord's hand, helping him to do this and to move them in an orderly fashion. And you'll see that, we talked about that the other week, how they had to be orderly and how they did everything. How they camped. Remember how the camp was laid out? They had to be in a certain way. This tribe had to be here. This tribe had to be all in the right position. When they moved in an orderly fashion. So the Lord he's of order. Everything should be done decently and in order. And the Lord illustrates that with this whole live situation with Israel. So now, then they go where? After Mount Sinai, they go to a place called Kadesh Barnea. Now that's almost right, getting right into Canaan, getting ready into the land. But what happens there when they get there? They stop at Kadesh Barnea and they do what? Have another party, hey, this is great, we're almost there. Anybody have any idea? The spies, they sent spies in there. They asked Moses, can we send some people in there to check the place out? Moses agreed, the Lord agreed, says yes. So they chose 12 guys to go in there and spy out the land, to check it out. So they're there for 40 days. checking out. So the spies come back, and the report is what?
10 say it's horrible not to go in there, they're afraid, and 2 say it's good.
I'm sorry.
I said 10 say that it's not good to go in there, they're like little grasshoppers to the people. They take it. 2 say this is the land of milk and honey. God said, let's take it, let's go. And they say no.
Yeah, good point. 10 of them said, hey, we can't go in there. We're like grasshoppers. These guys are humongous people, and they got big walled cities, and it's just, we can't handle this. And 2 of them say, no, let's go in there. God says, hey, we can do this. Let's go, go, go. Who were the 2 guys who said, let's go? Joshua and Caleb. So the majority votes. The majority vote was, let's don't go. The majority was wrong, right? Because what happens, the Lord says, we'll touch on this later, but the Lord says, okay, you don't go. But you're going to be dying. You're going to be buried right here in the desert. Basically, is what he told them. Your carcasses, as he calls it, are going to be in the wilderness. So they don't go. So now they got to do what? They got to start traveling for roughly close to 40 years out into the desert. So if you see this period of time, if you look in the book of Numbers, and we'll talk on this a little bit longer here, but also here I want you to see this. The history of the Numbers records very few events in these 40-year period. Very few events are recorded here. So the handout that you have there, I tried to break it down to show you that. And that's what we're going to be talking on this morning. This is they'll be in the slide here for that as well. But we're going to see the few things that did play. But though the period lacked in events, it did not lack in its significance as a transitional period. Like, well, what did they do here? What did they do there? Those things aren't all listed there. I mean, those events are not talked about here. Okay, but some key things did take place. Geographically, the population neither advanced nor retreated. They're in the wilderness and they're going where the Lord leads them. Okay, they're not going back to Egypt. They're not going forward. Okay. Rather, they wandered aimlessly about the wilderness desert areas between Kadesh and the Red Sea, consuming the years of God's calendar of judgment. Some of the names of the camping places are listed in Numbers chapter 33. And I have that list in here. I gave you a list of that last week, and it's also, there's a picture of it here in a second. We'll get to that point. But it's a whole list of all these different camps that Moses reiterated. This is where they went, and this is where they went. And they went to these different places here. But there's no recording what did they do at those places. They just moved where God said to move to, okay? Population-wise, the 600,000 warriors, and there's a little bit more than that, but the author says 600,000, met their appointed death over the space of the years. Some by violent causes, Numbers 16:40 died, and were buried in the wilderness, daily reminders of the great judgment of God. What was the judgment on them? You remember what God told them at Kadesh Barnea, what was going to happen? Who was going to die? The age 20 above. Man, I'm glad I was 19, you know. I barely got there. But all those who were 20 and above were going to die in the wilderness. And they murmured against the Lord. That's a lot of people. You think about that. When you're talking, we'll say there's 2.5 million people. And I don't know how many of that bunch is, what age that they are. But there's still a lot of people. And those 600,000 that had already been counted, the only ones that are counted are who? The 600,000. The warriors, the men. And they were not the Levites. Levites were not counted. God did not allow them to count the Levites. But all the men who are war, 20 years old and above, and their families, their wives, because they were also part of that. But their children, everybody under 20, made it. Okay? So the warriors, 600 warriors met their appointed death. I mean, he points that out over that time. So you can't imagine, every day we're burying somebody. Every day somebody else died. Constantly. Spiritually, there's new seeds of hope were sown. The original covenant and promise reaffirmed in the preparation for entering God's renewed. Because what happened, if you think about it, and we'll get to that. I'm jumping on a little bit here. Those who are under 20 had to learn some things, right? They had to learn some of the things, and Moses is going to reiterate that. You'll see that later. But he's going to read that to them at the end of the 40 years. But over those 40 years, they're growing up and they're having children over that 40 years of time. Okay? So here's the chart that I said that I've replaced this one in the handout here. Let me turn around to the with a pointer. That would help if I turn this thing on. Okay. So I replaced this so you can see this is what we're going to talk about, this time period. It could be 38 years, 39 years. I don't know. I've kept looking at this trying to figure this out. But go with this. So here's what we talk about. We're going to talk about rebellion of Korah. Some of you already know about rebellion of Korah. We're going to talk about that this morning real briefly here. We're going to talk about this period of time. Even though this is Numbers 33, you see Numbers 33. Oh, number 33 is over here. You know, Book of Numbers, this time period. With Numbers 33 is where Moses reiterates that list of places they went to. He kind of gives them a back, let's look backwards again. Let's look what we've been. We've been over the 40 years. He does that. So in that list is where he talks about some of it. And as it says here, it recorded the wilderness locations that Kadesh, on their way to Kadesh again. You'll see that in the map. Hopefully I'll get to that. And then here's the events we're going to talk about. The people complain. Moses strikes the rock. Down here, the people complain. And the death by snakes. Don't you love that? Death by snakes. And the brazen snake. And the brazen snake is provided. And the last thing, the conquest of kings Sihon and Og. The conquest of these two kings. So I'm going over those things that you see starred in there is what we're touching on this morning. So we're going to move through that part. Any question about what you just saw? Okay. I can do this, I forget. Okay, the long trip. As you see, I laid it out for you. The rebellion of Korah, the wilderness location list. We'll touch on that for a brief second there. The striking of a rock in anger, the look and live, and the conquest of kings. What's important about these? I chose these, Lord willing, by asking the Lord, how do I present all of this? There's so much here in the book of Numbers, and trying to minimize some of this and trying to present to you. But some of the things here I think stood out. I think it's worth looking at to help us. Okay? So the rebellion of Korah. So if you're in Numbers chapter 16, if you haven't got there yet, Numbers chapter 16, it says, now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Elib and On, the son of Pelah, the sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. Isn't that interesting? Just right there. These people, who are these people? These aren't the low-life kind of people you think. These are the people who are renowned, the 250 princes. These people are people of leadership, are pulled in together with this gripe, this complaint against Moses and Aaron. It's not the common people down there. This is the leadership that's pulled into this falling Korah here in this group. And it says here, and they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron and said unto them, ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift up your eyes above the congregation of the Lord. Verse 4, and when Moses heard it, what did he do? He fell on his face. He didn't blast them. He didn't fight them. He fell on his face because he's the kind of a leader who's humble. He's a humble leader. He's a meek man and serving the Lord because he knows who he's serving. He's serving the Lord. He's the Lord's man for that position, and yet he's being challenged here. And he spake unto Korah and unto all his company, saying, even tomorrow the Lord will shew who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him. Even him whom he hath chosen will be caused to come near unto him. This do, take you censers, Korah, and all his company, and put fire therein, and put in incense there in them, and before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord hath chose, he shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, you sons of Levi. And Moses said unto Korah, hear, I pray you, you sons of Levi. Seemeth it but a small thing unto you? Now, what is Moses going to tell them here, if you haven't already read this part? Moses is going to tell them something that they They should have been thinking about this before they started all this mess. And he's telling them, seemeth it but a small thing unto you, that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to him, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister unto them? And he hath brought thee near to him, and all thy brethren, the sons of Levi, with him, and seek ye the priesthood, for which cause both thou and all thy company are gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron that you murmur against him? Who is Korah? He's what? He's a Levi. And the Levites were chosen for what purpose? To serve the Lord. That was their purpose. I mean, it wasn't the Gadites, the Reubenites, it wasn't all them that were chosen particularly like this. It was the tribe of Levi that was chosen to be the servants to do what? To serve the Lord. I mean, that's a high honor. You think about it, to be these servants, the Levites were. So if you see here, I don't know if you read this already, had time to look at it. The most critical event of the years of wandering was the rebellion of Korah and his company against Moses and Aaron. Miriam's and Aaron's envy against Moses. Remember that? Miriam and his sister and his brother Aaron, they complained against Moses, and what happened to her? She had leprosy for 7 days, and they got over it. They had to wait. They couldn't move till she got over the leprosy. But that was he said that's minor here. But here, the pronouncement of judgment of Kadesh was mild compared to the sedition stirred up by Korah. This sedition by Korah, having this man of leadership and drawing those who are leaders, like I just said, the 250 princes going with him on leaders, following him. In both situations, however, the issue was the same, out of sheer jealousy. Jealousy. Jealousy rose its head up again. And here people say, hey, Moses, who are you? We're just as good as you. We're just as holy as you, and we could do this. You can only have one leader. Not everybody can be the leader. And the leader, a lot falls on that one leader. And Moses said, and because they were God's leaders, the challenge was really against God, since Moses' words to Korah. For which cause, number 16:11, for which cause both thou and all thy company are gathered together against who? The Lord. Who chose Moses? Who chose Moses and Aaron to be in those positions? Who chose Moses to be the leader and chose Aaron to be the head of the high priest? It was the Lord's hand. But everybody, this congregation of people that were leaders, supposedly leaders, the 250 princes, Korah and this group, said, hey, we don't like that idea. We think we're just as good as they are. Challenging that. And Moses is pointing out, you're not challenging me, you're challenging the Lord on this whole thing. So Korah was the son of Kohath of a Levite. The Kohathites, if you haven't already noticed, took care of the articles of the tabernacle. The handout I gave you, I think, last week about the order and who had what when they were traveling, what parts that they had. They were very instrumental in that. And carried the vessels of the tabernacle. Dothan and Abiram and On were sons of Reuben. Now this is a different tribe of people, but they were still involved in this. And they were joined by 250 princes of Israel. Now I don't know where the 250 came throughout the tribes, which tribes they came from, but it says 250 princes. Men, people of leadership. Okay, people of renown, as it said there in verse 2. Famous in the congregation, men of renown. But what happens here? So we move down quickly in chapter 16, and it says down here, verse 20, and the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And they all fell upon their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with the whole congregation? And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the congregation, saying, get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan and Abiram. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touching nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. So they gat up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side. Can you imagine that? There's Korah's camp, his tent, and here's Dathan, and here's Abiram's tent. Wherever they're at, they're nearby, and everybody backs away. Everybody gets away from that. God says, get away from them. Can you imagine that? Their families Korah and his family, all of them there. But all these people back away. The people get away from them. And Moses rose up, and all that were verse 26. And I pray you from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. So they gat them from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives, and their sons, and their little ones. And Moses said, hereby you shall know that the Lord hath sent me to do all the works, for I have not done them of mine own hand. And all these men, if these men die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me. But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth and swallow them up with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then you shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord. And it came to pass, as he had made an end of speaking, barely got done saying what he said, what happened? All these words, and the ground clave asunder that was under them, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses and all their men, there appertain unto Korah, and all their goods, they and all their appertain to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. And all Israel that were round about them fled at the cry of them, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. And there came out a fire from the Lord and consumed the 250 men that offered incense. God wasn't playing. He was not messing around with this thing about leadership, challenging the leadership and challenging God and provoking, as it says here, provoke the Lord in this situation. I don't know, that'd be a really scary situation to be standing there and backing away. Even though you backed away and you see the earth open up and they go down screaming and all of them just go and the earth closes back over. It had to be a sight to see and how rough that was. But God didn't mess around when it comes to judgment, right? The wilderness locations. Now we get to these wilderness locations here, the next thing here. Like I said, I showed you earlier what I'm choosing out here. So we're getting to the next section about this wilderness location. I took this piece right here out of that slide there that you see here. This is a presentation I gave you last week. It's a whole sheet of this, tell you is from this book, and he breaks down these different things here. But he shows, I thought was interesting, in Numbers 33, he lists all these places that Moses refers to. He just refers to these places. They didn't do anything. Did they do anything? Probably their normal things, but there was no key events that stood out here. That's what I'm trying to get to cover into these years. And what's interesting here is I try to put this is my notes here, trying to think of this. In Numbers 33 is a list of encampments from Mount Sinai to Kadesh the first time. And they went to Kadesh twice, and you'll see, we'll get back to that. But they went to it the first time. But with little or no explanation of events that occurred at these places. As noted earlier, they were years of void. One generation of Israel sacrificed sacred history was quickly dying off. I noted that earlier. In this time period, they were doing what? What was happening to those people? Those who had rebelled, those who had murmured against the Lord, and those the Lord had pronounced judgment on them, 20 years old and above, were to die in the wilderness. That's my note here. I'll have that there. After leaving Kadesh, several key events occurred for Israel. The failure of Moses, the death of Miriam, and then Aaron, the complaints and from a new generation, and the encounters with the local inhabitants. Now let me go back quickly so you can see that. You can see this here, where I'm pulling this from. Let me just back this up just real quickly here for you. I'll get back to that chart, if you don't have it in front of you. Okay, so back to here. Oh, where's the point? We talked about this rebellion here that took place. After they had been to, maybe I'm not saying it right, the first time they'd been in Kadesh, now they're going back to Kadesh again. This is the second time they go back. So they already been to Kadesh Barnea the first time. And we talked about that, the 12 spies. Now we just talked about the rebellion that took place. From that time to them coming back to Kadesh again, they're going to Moab, is where they're eventually going to. So these are the events that took place. This here is like a long period of time of no events, is what I'm trying to get to. A long event of times that took place for those years out there in the wilderness. But now they're heading back to Kadesh the second time around, is where they're heading back to. And with that, let's go to the slides back again. Back over here. With that, a few things took place. The death of Miriam, we'll talk about her in a second. And some of these things here, but I'm pointing out to you, we're going to talk about Moses striking the rock, about the snakes, and of course the battles that they had with these two kings and what's significant about these for you. But after, like I point here, after the leaving Kadesh, several key events occurred for Israel. Leaving Kadesh the first time, Kadesh Barnea. The failure of Moses, the death of Miriam, then Aaron, the complaints from a new generation, and the encounters with the local inhabitants, of course, of the Edomites, the Canaanites, the Amorites, etc. Some of those conflicts they had to deal with. So let's look at this. So the striking of the rock in Numbers chapter 20. So we're going to Numbers chapter 20. Numbers chapter 20, in verse 1. Just so you just know. Then came the children of Israel, unto even the whole congregation, into the desert of Zin in the first month, and the people abode in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. Miriam is who? Moses' sister. Now, do you know how old Moses is when he dies? How many? 120. We haven't got to that point. I know it's going to happen here shortly when you get to this point here. So his sister is older than him. Remember that? He was the one hidden in Egypt. He was the one hidden in the basket out there. And he's the one his sister's the one who was watching him and keeping an eye on him. And when the Pharaoh's daughter found him, she's the one who went to the Pharaoh's daughter. Hey, let me go see if I can find you an Israelite woman to help take care of him. Of course, she knew who to get, the mom. So she's an older. I don't know how much older she is. I couldn't figure out how old. But she was old enough than him in relation to Moses, what I'm trying to get to. So she dies, and it says here, and she was buried there. So the next verse here is verse 2, is interesting, because in verse 2 it says, and there was no water for the congregation, and they gathered to themselves together against who? Moses and Aaron again. Against Moses and against Aaron. And the people chode with Moses and spake, saying, would God that we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. And why have you brought up the congregation of the Lord into this wilderness that we and our cattle should die there? And wherefore have you made us to come up out of Egypt and bring us in unto an evil place? Is no place of seed it is no place of seed or of figs or of vines or of pomegranates, neither is there any water to drink. Now, what happened in verse 1? What happened in verse 1? I mean, it's open book. You can look at verse 1. Miriam, his sister, died. After his sisters die, it doesn't take them long to do what? Complain. No compassion about this whole situation. No compassion towards him and to Moses and Aaron about this. That's why I view this. No compassion at all. It's all about me. I'm first. I'm important. It's about me. That's just about these people. Even though this is a new generation has come up after these years. These are the children who survived, who are under age 20, who have grown up. And now they're doing what? They're doing the same thing that their parents doing. They've learned that gripe and complain against and murmuring against Moses and Aaron is what they've done here. It was at Kadesh Barnea that Moses displeased God. It's here you're going to see it. He incurred his pronouncement of penalty. So go down here in verse, where we at? Verse 7. Let's go down. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, take the rod, and gather thou the assembly together, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak ye unto the rock. He said, speak, right? He said, speak ye to the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth his water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock. So thou shalt give the congregation their beasts drink. And Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded, and Moses and Aaron gathered the people together before the rock, and he said unto them, Ye are now, hear now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, because ye believed me not, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. This is the water at Meribah, because the children of Israel strove with the Lord and was sanctified in them. Moses made a mistake here. Moses and Aaron together as leaders made a mistake here. He struck the rock twice. He was supposed to do what to the rock? Just speak to it. But out of his anger, and Moses is not a young guy, okay? He's up close to 120 now. He's getting ready, not too long, he's going to be passing away. And he's been dealing with them. But look here, I thought this was a good point, and that's why I put it here for you. Although the nature of Moses was wrong, although neither the nature of Moses wrong nor the punishment that God prescribed were especially severe, the sin of Moses sadly mars an otherwise extremely exemplary record. I don't know this otherwise exemplary record. After 80 years of preparation, this man of God had emerged with exceptional qualifications of character and of spirit. He would not have been expected to fall in even a minor matters. Yes.
Not only did he not speak to the rock and strike it, but he also took credit for giving. He said, "Must we?" Rather than giving glory to God.
Right. That's a good point. And I wanted you to, that's why I kind of read it that way, so maybe pick up on that. But yes, he said, we. Must we do this? Yes, Brother Tim.
The other thing he did is he messed up the typology that God was using there. Because the first time God told him to strike the rock, that was a picture of Christ dying for our sins and taking punishment. The
Right.
second time, once we have that salvation, all we have to do is ask to have our sins forgiven. We don't need to strike the rock again. So Jesus doesn't need to die twice.
Good point. Very good point, Tim. Very good point. Yeah, the first time he was to strike the rock earlier, which he did in his typology of Christ's death. This time he's just supposed to speak to the rock. And just like with us, we're supposed to talk to the Lord, speak to him. Yeah. Very good point. Let's move on. I'm trying to move on. Move on. This is from a commentary by a guy named James Sampe. He says, when God puts men before the world as his representative, he holds them to a strict account. Unbelief in a great leader of God's people brings reproach upon God himself. If even Moses, after a long career of singular faithfulness, finally failed through human weakness, who may presume upon his past achievements? Let him that thinketh he stand take heed lest he fall. He's pointing out to us, no matter how well we think we're serving the Lord, we've served the Lord all these years, are we immune to falling? No, we're not immune to that. And that's why it says there, he's quoting from 1 Corinthians here, I think I have it right here. Wherefore, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12, wherefore let him that thinketh he stand take heed lest he fall. You think about that, you think, oh, I'm a super Christian, super spiritual guy, whatever, and then something happens and I blow it. You blow it, you blow your character. And what happened to Moses here? He lost it. They failed. So the next event here, and of course he was told by God that him and Aaron would not go into the promised land. They would not go in because of this. So looking back here, here's chapter 21, moving on down a little bit further down. We got to get through here a little quicker if I can. The hindrance of foe, discouragement, and murmurings reared up again. This time at a most untimely moment as the people were actually on the march. They were moving along. And then if you look in chapter 21, verse 4. Go over there, chapter 21, verse 4. And they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom. And the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. Now, even though, let's see, I didn't tell you, well, let's back it in chapter 20, I'm not going to back it up, but chapter 20, I didn't tell you that, but unless you have that layout, you'll see his brother died. Aaron passed away. And it was like God wanted done, Aaron had to pass away. And of course, when Aaron's passing away, his son Eleazar became the high priest. So twice Moses has experienced death of his family member, his sister and his brother, and now here's another situation. He's standing on his own just about. I mean, he's got Eleazar as the high priest with him now, but here in chapter 21, in verse 4, and they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to come past the land of Edom, and the soul of the people were much discouraged because of the way. And the people spake against God and against Moses, wherefore have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. What did they didn't like anymore? The manna. They complained about the manna. The manna the Lord has taken care of them for all these years. And the Lord sent what? He sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if the serpent had bitten any man, that he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. You're probably familiar with this, probably have heard it many times, but think about this. They complained, and God sent these fiery serpents. In this Old Testament type of salvation by faith. Can you imagine that? All these people here, and these snakes come up and bite them. And they bite them, they're going to die. What did they have to do? Do something? Just look at that, what he's held up. Just look at that brass snake that Moses held up there, and they would live. They didn't have to do anything. I just can't fathom that all you got your brothers, your sister, whoever, your family. Look up there. And they said, I ain't going to look up there. You're going to die. Point out here, deliverance came only to the individual who looked up at the representative symbol. About salvation, when you try salvation, people think, well, I got to do something. No, you just got to trust him. We trust the Lord Jesus Christ. It's by faith. So the conquest of the kings, chapter 21, verse 21, move on down here. Moses and his host had now reached an obstacle in the land of the Amorites, whose king was Sihon. The experience with this king and his warriors would have far-reaching salutary effects for the Israelites. Look down there where it says what God has said. Will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations that are under the whole heaven, who shall hear of the report of thee, and shall tremble and be in anguish because of thee. Within fighting, now they've been out there in that desert. They've been traveling around these different places, but now they get to a point, they're getting ready to get into the Canaan land, and now they got an obstacle here. They got a king who will not let them pass by on the king's highway. Moses has sent, hey, we just want to go on the king's highway. We will stay on the king's highway. We will not touch your properties. We will pay for whatever we touch. If we drink any water, we'll pay for that. But he was not going to allow them to go on the king's highway, this pathway there. Was not going to allow that. A challenge, he was not going to do that. So they had to fight him. Okay, in chapter 21, just go to chapter 21 down there. Where am I at? Chapter 21, verse 21. And Israel sent messengers unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, and that's what they asked him. They said, let us pass through the land. We will not turn unto the fields or into the vineyards. We will not drink of the water of the well, but we will go along by the king's highway, and we will pass thy borders. And Sihon would not suffer Israel to pass through his border. But Sihon gathered all his people together and went out against Israel into the wilderness, and he came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. And Israel smote them with the edge of the sword and possessed his land from Arnon and unto Jabbok, even unto the children of Ammon. For the border of children of Ammon was strong. And Israel took all their cities, and Israel dwelt in all their cities of the Amorites, and Heshbon, and in the villages thereof. And Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab. Stop right there. If King Sihon had just allowed them to pass through, he could have still kept his property. But he lost it all. Interesting, the Lord said, hey, this is it. Take it. They just took it. So let's move on. So the other one is Og, King Og. It's a strange name for a person, but that's what it is there. But here down in chapter 21, go down there and go further down, verse 33. And they turned and went up by the way of Bashan. And Og, the king of Bashan, went out against them, he and all his people, to the battle of Edrei. And the Lord said unto Moses, fear them not, for I have delivered them into thy hand, and all his people and his land, and thou shalt go to him as thou didst unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt in Heshbon. And they smote him and his sons and all of his people there was none left there alive, and they possessed his land. Now I got this laying up here, and I guess you could see that illustration here. But the thing is that Og was a giant of a person, okay? His region was called the land of the giants, Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 13. His bed was 9 cubits long, which means 13.5 feet long and 6 feet wide. Pretty big sized guy, fitting in there. His 60 main cities had high walls and strong gates, and yet Israel was what? Was able to defeat him. No matter how big the obstacle is in front of you, if with the Lord on your side, there ain't nothing going to stop you. Nothing's going to stop you and prevent you from getting there with that. Genesis chapter 15, verse 16. I think I might have had that written here. The Lord had told Abraham, said, but in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. God gave those people, Og and Sihon and all them, 4 generations get right, and they didn't. These people were idolaters. They were horrible things they did. Just horrible things. But God brought judgment upon them. Last thing here. I heard this phrase years ago when a preacher said this: you got what you wanted, but you lost what you had. Remember when they were at the spies? Remember at the Kadesh Barnea, after the 12 spies had returned to the camp, and the 10 spies gave the bad report. All the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron and his whole congregation, said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in the wilderness? That's what they murmured about. And that's what they complained about. We should have just died in the wilderness. That's what we should be doing. And what did God say? You're going to get it. You can get what you wanted. Due to their unbelief, God gave them their desire. He said, your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. If you want to turn there, Hebrews chapter 3, and I'm going to turn there real quickly. I know I think it was the first bell I heard. I tried to get done by then, but I can't do it this morning. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 7 says, wherefore, as the Holy Ghost saith today, if you will hear his voice, hearken not your hearts. Harden not your hearts as in the provocation in the day of temptation in the wilderness. When your fathers tempted me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years, wherefore I was grieved with their generation, and said, they do always err in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So I swear in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. While it is said today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation. For some, when they had heard, did provoke, howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. But with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? And to whom sware he that should not enter into his rest, but to them that believe not? So we see that they could not enter in because of what? Unbelief. Not because how smart you are, whatever you are physically, whatever it could be. It's unbelief that makes the difference there. I'm going to share one last thing for you, and I know This is from J. Vernon McGee's. I thought it was a good thought. He said, for 40 years of wandering and the unbelief at Kadesh Barnea are not recorded in the faith chapter of Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11 is called the faith chapter. He said, the record of their unbelief is recorded in Hebrews chapter 3. This is called the doubting chapter, as he calls it. Any comments, any questions? All right, hopefully we're learning something that will help us to understand how the Lord worked and how he worked in their lives. All right, let's go.